Welcome back to Home Theater Gurus. This is episode 16. So today we're going to go over a question a lot of people have, and that's how much power do you need? So this question comes up a lot. How much power do I need? Do I need separate amps? Is my receiver going to be enough? Well, we have to look at a few things before we can really say yes or no and really decide how much power you use. And once we determine how much power you use, then you can make an informed decision on what you need to do as far as letting the receiver push your speakers or if you need to step up into separates. So the first thing we're going to look at is how sensitive your speakers are. Now, if you remember last episode, we went over speaker specs and kind of how to read those specs and determine what's what and what those specs really mean. Sensitivity is one of the most important speaker specs that is going to really determine power needed. It's a very, very important spec, assuming the manufacturer isn't fudging the numbers. So let's say we have a speaker that has a sensitivity of 90 dB at 8 ohms. So again, from last episode, what that means is from 1 meter away, we're just going to say 3 feet away, we had 90 dB. Okay, so that is how loud it is at 3 feet away with 1 watt. So once we start getting further from a speaker, it's common sense, the speaker's going to get quieter, right? The closer you get to it, the louder it's going to get. We know how much output we're going to lose as we get further away, and that is going to be 6 dB of loss, of sound pressure level loss every time we double distance. So this is at 3 feet. So if we double and we go to 6 feet, we're going to have a -6 right here. So if we go to 12 feet, it's going to be -12, another 6 dB. So right here, we were 90 dB, -6, so we're 84 dB at 6 feet away. And at 12 feet away, what is that, 78 dB. So we've lost a lot, we lose a lot of output as we get further and further away. But now if you notice, you go to 24 feet, that's where you get your next 6 dB loss. So you really lose a lot if you have someone sitting real close to a speaker, like 3 feet away, then 6 feet away. Those two guys are here, it's a 6 dB of difference between those two positions, 3 feet and 6 feet away. That's why it's good or best to have like a nice wide room, because you don't want anyone sitting real close to a speaker, because it's going to make such a big difference in output. Versus if you had someone sitting, say, 6 feet and 8 feet away, it wouldn't be too much, difference would be minimal compared to someone sitting 3 foot away versus 6 feet away, where you have a doubling of distance. But here's something very important. Even though we always hear you lose 6 dB per doubling of distance, this is not in a room. This is out in the field somewhere. This is, in an anechoic chamber. This is not real world sound loss. Not in a home theater or any room, anywhere in your house. No room in your house is going to have a 6 dB loss of doubling per distance, even though it's kind of not mentioned very often. Most people just stick with 6 dB like it's a rule that should be strictly adhered to even in a house, but that's just not true. So why isn't it true? Why isn't it 6 dB per doubling of distance? Well, we have reflections. You know how when you pull up to, say, McDonald's and you're going to order, something from the drive-thru, and you pull up next to that block wall and you can hear your engine, the sound of your engine reflecting off that wall. You got your window down. It's loud. Well, the same thing is happening in your room. The reflections that are coming off of these walls, they're loud. You're getting a lot of sound from the room itself, not just from your direct speakers. And of course, we're going to get into manipulating and treating those reflections a little bit down the road. So let's take a look at just one speaker. We're going to pick the center for our little example here. Okay, so of course, we have our direct sound going straight to the listener. Now this is going to be the loudest single source of sound directly to it. It's the shortest distance. Let's go ahead and do our reflections in green. We're going to have a reflection here and over here. We're going to have a reflection here. And then don't forget, we also have a reflection from the ceiling. So hopefully you have a carpet or something down, so we don't have like a really strong reflection from the floor, but you could have one from the floor if you've got nothing down there to absorb anything. So that's what 3 reflections from this one center speaker just on the horizontal plane and the ceiling, 4 if you count the ceiling. So that's not including anything on any other plane. I mean, you've also got reflections bouncing off, different angles to the seating area here. Now, of course, these are going to be the ones that are going to be the most important to treat. The ones here at these reflections back here. All right, let's go ahead and just do one of the mains real quick. Let's go with this left main right here. So we've got a reflection here. We've got a reflection here. Now, of course, these aren't all going to be accurate. I mean, this one actually would be around here somewhere. But let's see, what else do we have? We have a reflection here. So, as you see, there is a lot of sound. And I mean, the only one that is the actual speaker itself, and that reflection is right there. So, just out of these 2 speakers, we've got 2 direct sources of sound. And if we were out in the field, that's what we use to determine our 6 dB per doubling of distance. But there's all this other stuff going on in the room. That's extra output. Now, when you run like auto setup, or you take a measurement of one of your main speakers, or your center, or any speaker in the room, you're not measuring this direct sound by itself. You're measuring the combination of the direct sound with all the reflections, and it makes what's called the sound power, which is basically the accumulation of all of the sound from this speaker in the room. It's the room and the speaker combined. So this is why you don't get 6 dB of loss per doubling of distance in a room, because you have all this extra stuff going on, all this extra sound being reflected back to the listening area. We're not going to be doing manipulation of room reflections in this video, but you may be thinking, if you absorb all these reflections, then you're stripping them away. And that is true. You will have a little bit more loss per doubling of distance if you have a room that's all absorption, but this isn't 1990. We don't want to treat our room with all absorption unless there is some specific reason we need to, like we have speakers with poor off-axis that weren't designed very well, or the room itself is positioned in such a way or has an open, like one wall is open and we're trying to get a symmetrical sound. I mean, there's sometimes reasons why you may have to do that, but we don't want to jump on the all absorption bandwagon based on a video or based on an article that's 20 years old and isn't updated with the techniques that are used today, now that we have a lot better understanding of what sounds best to the human ear for the most spacious sound with the most focus. Okay, so now we have an idea of why we don't use this 6 dB of loss per doubling of distance. I'm sure some of you guys have heard that, so that's what you thought I was going to say. We lose 6 dB per doubling of distance. But now you see that we're in a room, so you understand why that is not going to be a fact in a room. If the room has a lot of reflection, say maybe you have no absorption in the room, you may have 3 dB of loss per doubling of distance. But we're going to say, just for argument's sake, that we're getting 4 dB for doubling of distance. Say the room is open on one side, so maybe it's a large room, you did some acoustics, So we're going to go with 4 dB. That's probably a lot safer and more realistic. Okay, so let's take our same speaker that at 3 feet we had 90 dB. So now at 6 feet we're going to have -4. So we're going to call it 86 dB. At 12 feet we're going to have another 4 dB of loss. So we're going to have 82 dB. All right, so let's say we're sitting 12 feet away and we are using 90 dB speakers. Our sensitivity is 90 dB. So we know that at the seats, with that 1 watt that gave us the 90 dB at 3 feet, we feed this speaker 1 watt and we're going to get 82 dB, somewhere around there at our 12-foot seating distance. Now, of course, if you're sitting at 10 feet, it's not going to be 82 dB. With 1 watt fed to it, it's going to be a little louder. So you're probably going to be 83 and a half, somewhere around there. So, you may have to kind of do a little bit of guesstimation, but this is going to get you in the ballpark. And of course at 24 feet, if we double it again, then we're going to be at 78 dB. So, I mean, that's 12 foot of distance and you've only lost, 4 more dB So sitting at 12 feet and 24 feet, you're not going to have as near as much loss as you had between, this is a short distance of only 6 feet right here, and you had the same 4 dB loss. If you're sitting at 13, 14, 15 feet, I mean, you may have lost another dB. It's not going to be much. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and place our seat at 12 feet. And we know that at 12 feet with 1 watt, we have 82 dB. So what do we need to do to get our output up? Well, we have to start giving it power, and we need to find out how much power. Now, one thing we need to keep in mind is how loud do we listen. Now, after you run your room setup or your auto correction like Odyssey or WiPo, whatever you have, it should be calibrated for reference at that point. Now, what that means is whenever your receiver is, say, 0 on the volume dial, that's assuming you use the negative scale. There's 2 scales you can use. One of the scales, 0, would be reference levels. And on the other scale, 80 would be the reference levels. If you read the negative, like I do, like I listen to negative 15 to negative 20, everything is in the negatives. The closer I get to 0, the louder it is. That's the scale I like. And in that one, 0 is reference. If you like the other one, where as the number gets larger, they're all in the positive numbers. As it gets closer to 80, it gets louder, and 80 is reference. So either one, no matter which one you use, it doesn't really matter, as long as you know about how loud from reference you are. So let's say you listen at negative 10, that's as loud as you ever go. All right, so we can take that information and find out how much power we need using that information. So if you go to negative 10, you never go any louder, so you're 10 dB from reference. So we know that at reference, our peaks can be up to 105 dB on any specific speaker in the room. So each speaker, if we're at reference, each speaker needs to be able to produce 105 dB on its own. But we're listening 10 dB below that, so we know that we need peaks of 95. We need clean peaks of 95 dB. So our goal is 95 dB. Okay, and we're at 82 dB, so we need to start adding power. Now the way power works is every time we double power, we gain 3 dB. So let's start pumping some power into the center speaker here. Okay, at 1 watt, we have 82. At 2 watts, we've got 85. At 4 watts, we've got 88. At 8 watts, we've got 91. And we need to go to 95, right? So we need to keep on going. At 16 watts, we have 94. Okay, so we're almost there, but we also need some headroom. So not only do we want to get to our 95 dB for peaks, we want to go over it a few dB just for some extra. We don't want to stress our equipment or be running out of power whenever we're getting those peaks. So let's keep on going. We'll move over here. We got 32 watts. Write a W so y'all know this is watts, just to keep that in your mind, watts. And this is SPL. All right, at 32 watts, we're gonna have 97 dB. Realistically, at 32 watts, we're okay. 32 watts is gonna give us clean power. Now we're not sitting far away, we're only 12 feet, so that's helping us a lot. Now these speakers also have a decent sensitivity. They're not power hungry. I mean, they're not high sensitivity, but they're not bad. So that's helping us here. But let's say we like reference. We want a reference capable room. Now, I mean, that's kind of loud. I don't like reference, but let's say you wanted reference. So we need to keep on going because for reference, we need 105 dB peaks with a little headroom on top. So let's just keep on going. So at 64 watts, we're at 100 dB. All right, at 128 watts, we're at 103 dB. So at 128 watts, we're at 103 dB. That would be a nice place to be at if you listen to at negative 5 dB from reference, or if 75 on the positive scale. It gives you a little bit of headroom over that 100 dB peaks that you know you're going to be getting. But at 128 watts, you're into the realm of separate. You're not going to have a receiver that's going to give you this kind of power with all channels driven. Honestly, even at 64 watts is kind of pushing it. There's some receivers out there that could do it, but if you've got Atmos and, you know, a 7.1.4 or even a 7.1.2 and you're using an external amp to push the other two channels, this is going to be iffy. I mean, you could look for benchmarks on your receiver, but it's going to be struggling. Now, this right here, the 32 watts, this would be realistic, you know, something that a receiver could actually push. But once we get past this line, we're getting into the region where separates really make sense. Okay, so here we're at a good place for 100 dB peaks, but we need 105 because we're saying we want reference. So let's go ahead and double this again to 256. Okay, and that gets us to 106 dB. All right. Now that 106 dB is just a smidge over 105. We really want a few more dB if we can, just in case, you know, if we really do listen to reference, we want to make sure we're not stressing our amplifier, you know, at all. Now this is of course assuming that our speakers can take that kind of power, because you remember we went over that last episode, you know, that peak wattage recommendation on our speakers is there to protect the speakers so we don't overdrive them mechanically and thermally. So let's say they can take it, so we're going to keep on adding power. So we double this 256 watts to 512 watts. And that gets us to peaks of 109. All right, now that's definitely going to be outputting reference and clean reference, assuming our speakers aren't getting too much power and distorting or bottoming out or anything like that. But as you see, if we want reference in that room, it's going to require some power. It's not going to happen with a receiver, and it's not going to happen with just, you know, a 100, 150 watt amplifier. We need some power. But there's an answer. So let's get a drum roll for high sensitivity speakers. This is why the DIY community has really grabbed a hold of high sensitivity speakers. You know, Eclipse has always been popular, even though they have been caught with their pants down a few times, fudgy numbers on sensitivity and frequency responses, among other things. But the high sensitivity speaker is going to allow you to use much less power. Now, I want to say this again. For myself, I'm happy here with 97 dB because I'm not going to use any of this. I don't need that kind of output. In my room, I've had a QSC DCA 1644, which is a digital cinema amp. And I mean, it puts out, I think at 8 ohms, 300 or 400 watts. Plenty of power, way more power than I need, because I'm probably using 16 watts. And I've had the same system on my receiver. And I've had the same system right now. I have it on a 7-channel amp that puts out 80 watts a channel. I can't tell a difference between any of those because no matter what I was using to push them, I was using so little power it didn't matter. But my speakers are really, really sensitive. And that's what we're going to get into now. Let's take a look at some sensitive speakers. Let's go ahead and wipe the board, try a different speaker. Okay, so let's say now we're going to try and go with something more sensitive. We don't want to feed our, our speakers that much power. It's too expensive, whatever. So this 95 is based on 3 feet. Okay, and then we're going to double it to 6 feet, and that's going to give us 91. Then we're going to double it again to 12, and that's going to knock off another 4, and that's going to be 87. So now we need to start powering this speaker because we know at 12 feet away with 1 watt, we're getting 87 dB. And we want to go ahead, let's go ahead and push it to reference. We want peaks of 105. Okay, so let's go ahead and start feeding it some power. Let's go ahead to 2 watts. All right, 2 watts is going to put us at 90. 4 watts is going to put us at 93. 8 watts is going to put us at 96. 16 watts is going to put us at 99. 32 watts is going to put us at 102. Now notice now we've got 32 watts and we're almost at reference. If you listened at 5 dB below reference, you only need peaks of 100. That 32 watts is going to give you that. And you're going to have a little headroom. Let's go ahead and give it 64 watts. And we are at 105. All right. But of course we have no headroom, so we need to double it again to 120 watts. actually 128 watts, and that would give us 108. Plenty of headroom. So now with a more sensitive speaker, this was a 95 dB speaker, we're able to get much louder with much less power. So for me personally, like I said, I listen -15 to -20 from reference. So let's say -15 is as loud as I go, which that's a true statement. That means I need peaks of 90 dB, 15 dB from that 105, which is what you get at reference. I'm 15 dB below that. I need clean peaks of 90. I'm using a measly 2 watts, okay? Headroom, you give me some headroom, 4 watts. That's all I need. 8 watts is going to be, 10 dB from reference, so like -10 on the dial. So you see we're using so much less power because our speakers are so sensitive. And you move up to a speaker that's 99 dB, and then you're even using less power. So this is why high sensitivity speakers are in such demand. But now, that's only going to really help you if you're trying to listen at reference. If you're a guy like me that listens at -15 to -20, your options are more open. You may find something that to your ears has a lot more refined sound than, say, something that's high sensitivity, or if you're comparing two speakers. So you have to look at your goals and how you're going to use the room. Don't be jealous of someone with 99 dB speakers just because they're 99 dB speakers and their room can hit levels yours can't. If you don't listen that loud, why? Why does that matter? It doesn't matter. For my levels, a speaker that has a sensitivity of 90 dB is perfectly fine. But the good thing about that is it opens me up to more options like domes. I'm not stuck listening to, a compression driver, which compression drivers can sound wonderful. That's what I have in my room in here, my movie room, and downstairs. But I do like domes too. They have a better horizontal dispersion, much wider. They do have some advantages. The only disadvantage they really have is sensitivity is not going to be as loud, or sensitivity is not going to be as high. So it's all about goals and how you're going to use the room and how loud you listen. Now, my house is for sale, and heck, in another month I may not even be here. So the next house, I'm going to do another movie theater, and it's going to be my third one that I've personally owned. And I'm not going to go with compression drivers. I'm going to go with domes. I'll probably go with something from Triad just because they're so well designed, the off-axis is so predictable, and I'm after quality sound. Now, even those domes, you can get reference sound. They've got a decent sensitivity, so you can definitely get reference levels out of those kind of speakers if you give them enough kick in the butt and treat the room properly. But like I said, for me, even a speaker like that, I'm not going to be working hard. I could actually get my levels just fine, or hit my levels just fine with just a receiver. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. And one reason is when you're trying to push 7, 11, 13 channels, on your onboard amplifiers on your receiver, that's stressing the power supply of the receiver out quite a lot. It's one power supply trying to push all these separate amps that are built into the receiver. So I still like to use separates if I can. But the point is, if you're only using like 8 watts, then you probably don't really need it. But if you get up to where you're stressing it, getting towards the max of each channel's capability, 50 to 60 watts a channel, you may want to start looking into separates just to kind of ease the load off of your receiver. Not saying it's a must, but you need to kind of look at that and make that decision for yourself. Now, one little trick that I want to show you. Okay, so for every 10 dB, it's going to be 10 times the power. So let's say you've got some speakers in your room and you're getting levels of 100 dB and you've got a 200 watt amp. And that 200 watt amp is maxing out at 100 dB. That's as loud as it's able to get. If you want to increase that by 10 dB and you want to get to 110, you're going to need 10 times the power. So in other words, just to get that 10 dB, you're going to need 2,000 watts. So when you start trying to get really loud, you're doubling power for every 3 dB. To go 10 dB is 10 times the power. So this is also why, say if you have an 85 dB speaker and you have a 95 dB speaker, you can feed that 95 dB speaker 1/10 of the power to hit the same levels. Alright guys, so I hope y'all found this useful. That's going to be it for this episode. There's not really a whole lot more I can say about that. It kind of is what it is. So you can take this information and kind of calculate your seating distance, the sensitivity of your speakers, kind of get a ballpark idea of how much power you're using or how much power you need to hit your levels. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when the next video comes out. Don't forget to check down there in the description for this episode's cool find. And I got a request today actually to do an episode on mid-bass slam, that chest kick that everybody wants. Now we touched a little bit of that on episode 7 when we were doing the Room EQ Wizard setup and the house curves, but we're going to do an episode just on that. A lot of people are really interested in that, and there's a lot of misconceptions of what it takes to get that. I see that all the time. So we're going to go over that in the next episode, so be looking for that one. And that's going to be it for this one, guys. I'll see y'all next time.